I'd like to show you how to make a lovely freestyle frame for a beautiful stone or a bead. And it looks quite complicated, but in fact it's incredibly simple. So even for a beginner at this level, you can do something like this. And it always looks great hung on a cord or a chain. So I'm going to show you how to get started, and I'm going to be using just a very plain black bead so that you can see the effect. We'll use some 0.8 silver-plated copper wire, which is 20 gauge. So to begin with, thread the bead or the stone that you're going to use with the wire. Use your round nose pliers to create a double link. Don't make it too small, so go about halfway down the tool and roll the wire so that you have a doubled link rather than just one. And push that up to the bead hole. So that's your first link. Now cut it off from the spool. You'll need to leave a good inch or so to get another double link on the other side. It's always better to cut too much than too little, because you can't add it on, but you can take it off. So again, pick up the very, very end and just roll the wire around the tool so until it touches the bead hole. Now if you've taken too much wire, just nip a bit off there, but that worked out just right for me. Now make sure that these two loops are sitting on the same plane. So at this stage, just use your tool to twist those circles so that they're running in the same direction to each other. Now we're going to use another piece of wire to make that frame. And it's very much of a freestyle frame. So to start off with, I'm going to thread one of those double links with the wire, and I'm just going to make a little hook at this end because I want to hook it to that first link and I don't want it to slip off. So make that hook and then just close it with your flat nose or chain nose pliers, doesn't matter which. Doesn't matter how you do this, just make sure that there is no gap in there. Now, to work out how much wire you need for the frame, it's really a bit of a guesswork, but I would say cut roughly about 6 times the length of the bead that you're framing. So very approximately, I'm going to guess that to be about here. But really, the amount of wire you cut means if you have more, you'll have a more frilly frame around the bead, and less, you have something simpler. That's all it is. And I would suggest that you make 1 or 2 of these, and then once you've done 1 or 2, you'll get the hang of it, and you can decide how much wire the next one will have. So then you thread the other end through the opposite double link. So push it through and bring the wire around the bead. And back through the top again, and you keep threading from top to bottom. As long as you don't take the wire over the bead, just keep a little gap around on each side, you'll be fine. So back and forwards from the top to the base. Just thread it, leaving a bit of a gap. And when you run out of wire, or you've got just enough to come and finish at the top again, thread it back through, and you can do 1 or 2 things. You can either secure it around that double link, or, and we did a little bit of a spiral in the bead cage earrings, if you remember, you can do a little bit of a spiral here. So little circle, and pick up that circle with your flat nose pliers and just curl it around to create a little bit of a spiral. It just makes the whole piece look a bit more decorative. And I'm going to flatten that onto the bead. There we go. Now at this stage it looks like a bit of a mess, but I hope to be able to change that for you in just a moment. So we're going to tweak these edges. Keep it flat on your mat for this, and take either your chain nose or your round nose pliers and position it on one of these side wires and twist, and you will obtain a little sort of nice wiggle in the wire there. And keep doing that to all the wires that you've got. So you can do this as often as you want, create as many wiggles around the frame as you wish until you are satisfied with the overall result. I'm actually quite pleased with that. I think that's probably enough. I mean, I could go mad, but I think that looks fine. Now, to finish off, we're going to hammer the edges. Do you remember we talked about hammering and how that hardened the wire? It compresses it and flattens it. So I'm going to lift, so where you've got these little edges, you can lift it and sit it on the edge of your block and then just stroke the edge. Can you see how that spreads and flattens the edge there and toughens it up, obviously? And I'll do that to the rest of the piece. I'm just picking out areas that I can get to with my hammer. Try to avoid hammering any wires where they're sitting on top of each other, because you'll actually hammer one into the other and weaken it. So only hammer where they're not on top of each other. And keep looking at it and seeing where you can go next. And once you've hammered the edges, you should be there. Obviously, keep well away from the bead, because otherwise you could shatter that. And when you've done your hammering, just rearrange it a bit. Make sure you've got it as you want. Make sure you've flattened your spiral there, and you'll find that's your framework. Now we need to suspend that off something, so I'm going to show you how to make a simple bail. We can make a bail out of this 0.8 20 gauge wire, and that can be done again with hammering. So I'm just going to cut about an inch, inch and a half. Always cut a little bit more than you need, because you can take it off later. Make sure that's a straight length, so just straighten that out. And all you want to do is hammer this center piece to spread it. You can directionalize your hammering, so if it's pushing out in one direction too much, turn it over and now hammer it in the other direction. Now you can see that spread in the center, and I'm just going to curve that around my round nose pliers to make the bail. Now check that the ends are at the same length. If they're not, you can snip one end so that they are, and create loops, curling them in towards each other at each end. And this is what our pendant is going to be suspended from. That's the bail. And now we're going to make one link to suspend that. The link, if you refer back to the jump ring section in chapter 2, if you remember, we just curled the wire around the tool, the round nose pliers, and we formed a coil and cut into that coil and created little separate rings by cutting them off one by one. So there's our link. Now that can be opened up. Don't forget to open your ring sideways. Feed that through the top of the pendant and into the top of the bail, and then close those together. And just check that's nice and even. And can you see that's the bail? And that's where you can thread a chain, a cord, whatever you want to suspend it from, a ribbon, to finish off your piece. If you'd like to learn how to make a cord end clasp, I'll show you in this film, because we did a fish hook which will be on a chain or a linked bead, but it's quite fun to be able to actually put one straight onto a cord. Now, to make this for a cord, what I would do is use my round nose pliers and create the first link like this, and I would check to see if it fitted snugly. Now that is a little bit too loose, so I'm going to go back on my pliers and just find the right diameter for this cord. That's a bit better. So once I've established the diameter of the cord, I carry on curling the wire on the same spot. It's exactly the same sort of technique as when we were making jump rings. So you just curl it around on the same spot. And you want to curl that around for about 1/4 of an inch or so. Just make a little bit of a stem on this coil. That would probably be long enough. Now, once you've done that coil, cut it off, leaving about 1/2 inch. And with that 1/2 inch, you pick up the very, very end with your round nose pliers near the end of it, so it's quite the widest part, and roll that wire back around until it sits on top of the coil. And we'll just straighten that out and cut off any raggedy ends down here. So just use your cutters too. So that's what you want to create, and we want to toughen up the end. You remember we talked about clasps and how much wear and tear they take. So I'm just going to stroke hammer the end here. Now for the other end, I've got to make the fish hook. So I'm going to start by making another coil. So feed the wire out from the spool, and again I've established the diameter of the cord, so I'm going to put my wire on my pliers there and curl the wire around to make another coil, just as I did before. So when it's long enough, which is about here, I'm going to cut it off the spool, but this time I'm going to leave a lot more wire because I have to make the fish hook. So it's about 2 inches. And again, as I said, better more than less. And I'm going to create the fish hook directly on this projecting wire. So if you remember, when we did the findings, you make a little link, you position your round nose pliers at the fattest part of your tool, and you bend it around to form the hook. Now you can see there is a bit of a gap between the coil and the fish hook. This is not a problem because you can just roll the wire back around on the tool to make your coil a bit longer, and when it comes up to the fish hook, that's when you stop and then position that upright. And again, we need to toughen this. So we'll put it back on our steel block and hammer the tip here. And there you have it. So to fix this onto your cord, push the cord through the coil, and using your chain nose pliers, because they're nice and tapered and got a thin end, you want to squeeze just the last ring of that coil. So you pick that up and just little movements to tighten it. It's very much like crimping. So you only want to touch that last little circle at the end of the cord. And once you've squeezed it and tightened it around the cord, it will hold. It will stay fixed. I often put a little bit of super glue just there as well because I want to make sure that it never comes off. So the other side is exactly the same. I'm going to thread the cord through the coil, and again I'm going to crimp or squeeze just the last ring on that coil and tighten it around, and I can push it down if it's sitting up. Just push it in a bit, and there you have it. It's nice and tight. And there is the clasp that's fixed onto, I need to open that a bit more, fixed onto the end of your cord, and it makes a really nice fastener on ribbons, cords, or anything that you have lying around. So there you have it, a freestyle frame for a bead or a semi-precious stone, and it works with every shape and every contour and size. So have fun making your own very unique pieces.